A bullied nerd pushed to the brink became the most feared fighter in school. Marcus had always been the perfect student, praised by teachers and envied by classmates. But behind his stellar grades and polite demeanor lay a suffocating reality. Every day after school, he returned home to face his father's relentless expectations. Every small mistake was met with harsh criticism, sometimes even violence. His father treated him like a machine designed solely to produce perfect test scores, never seeing the boy slowly breaking under the pressure. The constant stress was crushing Marcus from the inside. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of expectations, gasping for air that never came. It wasn't until his family moved across town and he transferred to Riverside High, a school notorious for its rough reputation, that something inside him began to change. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a strange sense of possibility. On his first day, the homeroom teacher, Ms. Chen, gave him a warning that would prove prophetic. "Keep your head down and don't draw attention to yourself," she said quietly, "especially around Danny Kim. He's trouble, and he doesn't like students who think they're better than everyone else." Danny Kim was exactly the type of student Marcus had never encountered in his previous elite school. Tall, aggressive, and always surrounded by a group of followers, Danny ruled the freshman class through intimidation. He had a particular hatred for students who showed any sign of academic success, viewing them as threats to his social dominance. Marcus tried to follow the teacher's advice, but fate had other plans. During lunch on his second day, while walking past Danny's usual table, Marcus accidentally bumped into him, causing Danny's portable music player to crash to the floor. The cafeteria fell silent as Danny slowly picked up the device, examining it for damage. "You think you're too good for this place?" Danny's voice was low and menacing. "Walking around here like you own the place?" Marcus wanted to apologize, to diffuse the situation, but something about Danny's tone reminded him of his father's voice during those brutal study sessions. The same condescending tone, the same barely contained violence. Without thinking, Marcus found himself standing straighter, meeting Danny's glare directly. "I said I was sorry," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The cafeteria erupted in whispers. No one had ever seen the new transfer student stand up to Danny Kim. The bully's face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. Without warning, he shoved Marcus hard, sending him stumbling backward. "Are you insane?" Danny snarled, advancing on Marcus. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" Marcus didn't fight back. He had no experience with physical confrontation, and despite the anger building inside him, he still hoped to avoid escalation. But Danny wasn't finished. After school, as Marcus walked toward the bus stop, he found his path blocked by Danny and 3 of his friends. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," Danny said, pulling out his phone. "Now you're going to pay for it. Give me your number." Marcus reluctantly complied, not wanting to make the situation worse. Danny immediately sent him a text message. "You have 10 seconds to reply to every message I send, or things are going to get very bad for you." Marcus glared at him and walked away without responding. The next morning, while getting ready for school, he heard his father screaming at him from downstairs about his latest test scores. In the chaos of the morning routine, he completely forgot about Danny's threat. By the time he arrived at school, Danny was waiting for him, furious about the ignored message. As punishment, Danny yanked the headphones from Marcus's ears and grabbed his music player, an old device that had belonged to his deceased older brother. "This is mine now," Danny declared, holding the device high above his head. "Maybe next time you'll learn to show some respect." The music player had been Marcus's most treasured possession. His brother had given it to him before his death, telling him that music could transport him to a world where their father's voice couldn't reach. Seeing it in Danny's hands triggered something primal in Marcus. "Give it back," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Danny laughed and deliberately threw the device to the ground, stomping on it with his boot. "What are you going to do about it, genius?" The sound of the plastic cracking under Danny's foot was like a gunshot in Marcus's mind. All the years of suppressed rage, all the nights of silent tears, all the moments when he had wanted to scream but couldn't, everything erupted at once. Marcus lunged forward, his fist connecting with Danny's jaw with surprising force. Danny stumbled backward, shocked by the sudden attack, but Marcus wasn't finished. He threw himself at the bully with the desperation of a drowning man fighting for air. They crashed to the ground, rolling and punching with wild abandon. Marcus fought like his life depended on it, clinging to Danny and using his body weight to keep him down. The other students formed a circle around them, cheering and recording with their phones. Marcus had never felt anything like this before, the pure, raw release of finally fighting back. When Danny tried to get up, Marcus slammed him back down with a violence that surprised everyone, including himself. By the time teachers arrived to break up the fight, Danny was on the ground, unable to stand. Marcus slowly picked up the pieces of his broken music player, his knuckles bloody and his shirt torn. For the first time in years, he smiled. After school, Marcus sat alone in his room, replaying the fight in his mind. The rush of adrenaline, the feeling of power, the look of fear in Danny's eyes, it had been intoxicating. He had discovered something about himself that day, something dark and exhilarating. That evening, while having dinner with his family, Marcus's mother noticed the bruises on his knuckles. When she asked about them, he lied, saying he had fallen down the stairs. His father, as usual, was more interested in discussing Marcus's academic performance than his physical well-being. "Your grades are slipping," his father said coldly. "I don't care what distractions you're dealing with at that school. Your only job is to study and succeed." Marcus nodded silently, but inside he felt a new kind of rebellion stirring. The fight with Danny had awakened something in him that couldn't be easily suppressed. The next day at school, Marcus was approached by a quiet boy named Alex Chen. Alex had been watching the fight from the sidelines, and unlike most students who feared getting involved with Danny's conflicts, he seemed genuinely impressed by Marcus's courage. "That was incredible yesterday," Alex said, walking alongside Marcus to their next class. "I've never seen anyone stand up to Danny like that. Most people just let him push them around." Marcus studied Alex carefully. The boy was small and thin, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He seemed like the type of student who would normally be targeted by bullies, yet he carried himself with a quiet confidence that intrigued Marcus. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "Because I think you have potential," Alex replied, "and because I hate bullies more than anything else in the world." Before Marcus could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Tyler Park, a junior who was known throughout the school as Danny's enforcer. Tyler was taller and more muscular than Danny, with a reputation for settling disputes with his fists. "You're the new kid who thinks he's tough," Tyler said, blocking their path. "Danny told me all about you. He wants to see you after school." Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but not from fear. The prospect of another fight filled him with an anticipation that he found disturbing and exciting in equal measure. "Tell Danny I'll be there," Marcus said, surprising both Tyler and Alex. Alex grabbed Marcus's arm as Tyler walked away. "Are you crazy? Tyler's been boxing since he was 8 years old. He'll destroy you." "Maybe," Marcus said, but he was already planning his strategy. "But I'm not the same person I was yesterday." After school, Marcus met Tyler in the vacant lot behind the school. A small crowd had gathered, including Danny, who was eager to see his humiliation avenged. Tyler wasted no time, immediately launching into a series of quick jabs that caught Marcus off guard. The first few punches landed hard, and Marcus realized that Tyler was indeed skilled. But as the fight progressed, Marcus began to adapt. He studied Tyler's patterns, looking for openings and weaknesses. When Tyler threw a particularly aggressive combination, Marcus ducked low and swept his legs, sending the bigger boy crashing to the ground. The crowd gasped as Tyler struggled to get back up. Marcus didn't give him the chance. He pounced on Tyler, raining down punches until the other boy stopped fighting back. When it was over, Marcus stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily but victorious. Danny stared at Marcus with a mixture of fear and respect. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied, his voice cold and final. "And if you ever touch my things again, I'll make sure you regret it." Word of Marcus's victories spread quickly through the school. Students who had previously ignored him now watched him with curious eyes. Some approached him with respect, others with fear. The transformation was intoxicating. Alex became Marcus's constant companion, offering advice and support. "You're becoming something special," Alex told him one afternoon. "But you need to be careful. Power like this can be addictive." Marcus dismissed Alex's concerns. He felt more alive than he had in years. The constant pressure from his father seemed more manageable when he had an outlet for his frustration. Fighting had become his escape, his way of proving to himself that he wasn't powerless. But his newfound reputation came with new challenges. Vincent Torres, a senior with connections to street gangs, decided that Marcus was becoming too influential. Vincent controlled most of the illegal activities at Riverside High, and he saw Marcus as a potential threat to his authority. One afternoon, Vincent cornered Marcus in the school's music room. "I've been hearing interesting things about you," Vincent said, his voice deceptively calm. "Some people think you're the new king of this school." Marcus sized up his opponent carefully. Vincent was older, more experienced, and had a reputation for extreme violence. But Marcus had learned to embrace the fear, to use it as fuel for his aggression. "I don't want to be king of anything," Marcus said. "I just want to be left alone." Vincent laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "That's not how this works. You've made yourself a target by beating up my associates. Now you have to face the consequences." The fight that followed was the most brutal Marcus had experienced. Vincent was skilled, vicious, and completely without mercy. He used every dirty trick he knew, targeting Marcus's previous injuries and trying to break his spirit with psychological warfare. "You're just like all the other wannabe tough guys," Vincent taunted as he landed a series of punches to Marcus's ribs. "You think you're special because you can beat up a few kids? Wait until you meet real violence." Marcus absorbed the punishment, waiting for his opportunity. When Vincent overextended himself during a particularly aggressive attack, Marcus grabbed him and they both crashed through a window, falling to the ground below. The impact stunned Vincent long enough for Marcus to gain the upper hand. The fight ended with Vincent unconscious and Marcus standing over him, his face covered in blood, but his eyes blazing with triumph. He had defeated the school's most feared bully, establishing himself as the new alpha. But victory came with a price. Marcus's grades began to suffer as he spent more time thinking about fighting than studying. His father's anger reached new heights, and the confrontations at home became increasingly violent. His mother, who had always been passive, began to show signs of serious concern. "What's happening to you?" she asked one evening after finding him practicing fighting techniques in his room. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize." Marcus wanted to explain, to tell her about the freedom he felt when he fought, about the way violence had become his only means of self-expression. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply said, "I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be." The situation at home deteriorated further when his father discovered the extent of Marcus's involvement in school violence. During a particularly heated argument, his father threatened to send him to a military academy, and his mother finally broke her silence. "Enough!" she screamed, stepping between them. "I won't let you destroy another son with your obsession with perfection." The reference to Marcus's deceased brother hung heavy in the air. His brother had also been a victim of their father's impossible standards, ultimately taking his own life when the pressure became unbearable. The music player that Marcus treasured so much had been his brother's final gift, a symbol of the escape that music could provide. Marcus felt the weight of his family's tragedy pressing down on him. He began to understand that his addiction to fighting was following a similar pattern to his brother's self-destructive behavior. Both of them had been searching for a way to cope with their father's abuse, and both had found dangerous outlets for their pain. The realization didn't stop him from fighting, but it changed the nature of his violence. He began to seek out bullies specifically, justifying his actions as a form of vigilante justice. Together with Alex, he started what they called the Equalizer Project, systematically targeting students who preyed on the weak. Their first major target was Nathan Reed, a student from a neighboring school who had been terrorizing younger kids with impunity. Nathan's father was a prominent surgeon, and his family's wealth had always protected him from consequences. Marcus and Alex decided to change that. Wearing masks to conceal their identities, they confronted Nathan and his crew in a parking garage. The fight was filmed by Alex, who planned to use the footage to expose Nathan's crimes. Marcus dominated the encounter, using techniques he had learned from his previous battles to systematically dismantle Nathan's defenses. "This is what happens when you pick on people who can't fight back," Marcus said, as he stood over Nathan's defeated form. "Consider this your education in consequences." The video went viral within hours, and Nathan's reputation was destroyed overnight. His father's medical practice faced scrutiny, and Nathan himself was expelled from school. For Marcus and Alex, it felt like justice had been served, but their vigilante activities attracted unwanted attention. Robert Chen, a professional fighter with connections to organized crime, decided that Marcus and Alex were becoming too dangerous to ignore. Robert had been hired by some of the families whose children had been targeted by the Equalizer Project. The confrontation with Robert was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Robert was not a school bully or an amateur fighter. He was a trained killer who had spent years perfecting his craft. When he and Marcus finally faced each other, it was clear that Marcus was outmatched. "You think you're a hero," Robert said, as he systematically dismantled Marcus's defenses, "but you're just another punk who got drunk on power. Let me show you what real strength looks like." The beating that followed was severe enough to hospitalize Marcus. As he lay in the hospital bed, his body broken and his spirit crushed, he began to question everything he had become. The violence that had once felt like freedom now seemed like another form of prison. Alex visited him regularly, bringing news from the outside world. "The whole school is talking about what happened," Alex said during one visit. "Some people are saying you went too far, that you became the same kind of bully you were fighting against." Marcus stared at the ceiling, processing Alex's words. He thought about his brother, about the music player that had been destroyed in his first fight with Danny, about the way violence had gradually consumed his life. He realized that he had been following the same destructive path as his brother, just using different methods. When he was finally released from the hospital, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of seeking revenge against Robert, he chose to walk away from fighting altogether. He transferred to a new school, one with a reputation for accepting students with troubled pasts. Westfield Academy was an experimental institution designed to help students who had been failed by the traditional education system. The teachers there understood that some students needed different approaches to learning and growing. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he might have a chance at a normal life. But normal was proving to be more difficult than he had anticipated. The addiction to violence was still there, lurking beneath the surface. He found himself getting into arguments with classmates, looking for excuses to fight. The adrenaline rush he had experienced during his battles at Riverside High had left him feeling empty and purposeless. His mother, who had finally found the courage to leave her abusive husband, was trying to build a new life for both of them. She had gotten a job at a local clinic and was working to pay for therapy sessions to help Marcus deal with his trauma. But their father's influence was still strong, and he was using his connections to try to regain control over their lives. "You can't run from your responsibilities forever," his father told him during one of their court-mandated meetings. "I'm going to make sure you get the education you need, even if I have to force it on you." Marcus felt the familiar rage building inside him, but this time he recognized it for what it was, a learned response to trauma that had been reinforced by years of violence. Instead of lashing out, he took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "I'm not running from anything," he said. "I'm trying to become a better person than you ever were." The confrontation with his father marked a turning point in Marcus's recovery. He began to understand that his addiction to fighting was rooted in his desire to feel powerful in a world where he had always felt helpless. The violence had given him a temporary sense of control, but it had ultimately made him just as destructive as the bullies he had fought. Working with a therapist, Marcus began to explore healthier ways to channel his energy and emotions. He started writing about his experiences, documenting his journey from victim to perpetrator and back to someone trying to find redemption. The process was painful, forcing him to confront the harm he had caused to others and to himself. Alex remained a loyal friend throughout Marcus's recovery, but their relationship had changed. Alex had also been affected by their vigilante activities, and he was dealing with his own guilt and trauma. They supported each other through the difficult process of accepting responsibility for their actions. "We thought we were heroes," Alex said during one of their conversations, "but we were just angry kids with too much power and not enough wisdom." Marcus nodded, understanding the truth in Alex's words. They had both been seduced by the simplicity of violence, the black and white thinking that divided the world into good guys and bad guys. Reality, they were learning, was much more complex. As Marcus worked on his recovery, he began to reconnect with the parts of himself that had been buried under years of trauma and violence. He rediscovered his love of music, finding solace in the same melodies that had once provided escape for his brother. He began to understand that his brother's gift had been about more than just avoiding their father's anger. It had been about finding beauty and meaning in a world that often seemed devoid of both. The broken music player that had started his journey into violence became a symbol of his recovery. He spent weeks carefully repairing it, learning about electronics and engineering in the process. When he finally got it working again, the first song he played was one that his brother had loved, a piece about finding hope in the darkest moments. Marcus's story was far from over. He still struggled with anger and the temptation to solve problems with his fists. But he had learned that true strength came not from the ability to hurt others, but from the courage to heal himself and help others do the same. The boy who had once ruled his school through fear was slowly becoming a young man who understood that the greatest victories were won not in fights, but in the daily struggle to become better than you were yesterday. The scars on his knuckles would always remind him of where he had been, but they no longer defined where he was going. Marcus had learned that everyone carries their own battles, and that the real test of character comes not in how hard you can hit, but in how well you can help others find their own path to healing. In the end, he discovered that the greatest fight of all was the one against the darkness within himself, and that victory in that battle was not a single moment of triumph, but a commitment to keep fighting for goodness every single day.